ladies and gentlemen, let's make a start on our final officers' question time, and that is for candidates of the President of the Student Union. So we have Larissa, James, Kostaf, Ben, and Josh. Let's give them a warm round of applause. So, same format as before. We'll have 2-minute speeches from each of them, and then we'll take your questions from Facebook Live, from the floor, and any written questions that you may have. So let's give a warm round of applause to our first candidate for her opening speech, Larissa Kennedy.
Hi, my name is Larissa. I'm the current Education Officer and Deputy President, and I'm running to be your next President. Over the last 7 months, just a couple of the things that I've achieved for you include founding the Decolonize Project, which gives paid opportunities for students to engage with co-creating and liberating the curriculum, developing Book a Desk, a service that ensures that students can book spaces in the library to combat underusage in certain areas so that there's more study spaces available, and spearheading the SU's responses to sexual violence, racism, homophobia, and transphobia and ableism on our campus. As President, I commit to using this experience to ensuring that we reclaim our university. Yes. That includes imposing tougher sanctions on all forms of oppression at Warwick and ensuring there's accessible study space in every single building and further democratizing our university. This also includes improving your day-to-day experiences, whether it's ensuring that there's cheaper on-campus accommodation or specialist mental health services available. This also means fighting for your rights to free education, free, liberated, accessible education, and your right to fair pay, whether you're a postgrad who teaches or you work in the Dirty Duck. And that also means connecting you better to your SU, ensuring that there's officer accessibility and accountability, and more flexibility of opportunity to engage with us, as well as making sure that you control the music in things like the Terrace Bar and that there's a more diverse range of events that we offer. So if any of that sounds good to you, please do vote Larissa for President, and let's reclaim our university together. Thank you.
Let's welcome to the stage and give a warm round of applause to our second candidate for the night, James Butler.
You have to stand by with the phone. My notes went missing. Well, hello all. I'm James Butler, and I'm standing to be your next Student Union President again. I'm pledging to make tangible, positive changes that will improve and enrich the experience of the average student, not just with the Student Union, but with Warwick as a whole. So much like my signs, I'll get straight to the point about my policies. As your President, dealing with transport, I would work with Stagecoach and National Express to ensure that there are more buses at peak times, so we don't see mass queues like we have done this year. I would try and get a freeze on bus pass prices, and I would also work with the university to create a large-scale car-sharing scheme to be used as an alternative to the buses, and perhaps try and break their monopoly on transport. Being your welfare chair, I recognise there is a great deal more the SU and the university could be doing. That is why, as your President, I would create welfare task forces to deal with student safety and international students' welfare, promote and expand the current welfare campaigns the Student Union undertakes, and continue my campaign for universal lecture capture. As for student experience, as your President, I will lobby for the return of a 24/7 Roots grocery store, especially for its return in Term 3. Freeze Warwick accommodation prices and drink prices in Student Union outlets, and create more study spaces by utilising empty seminar rooms and expanding the opening hours of learning grids. So if you want this and much, much more, I encourage you all to vote James Butler for President and make your experience better with Butler. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give another warm round of applause to our third candidate for the night, Kostaf.
I haven't interacted with any of you before. So my name is Kostaf, and I'm doing a master's in public policy here. this time, I want to stand for SU President. My most critical agenda in my manifesto is restructuring the student union, student council, and by establishing an SU parliament. By this, I don't mean I'm going to re-establish the association memorandum of association or anything of the sort. What I mean is, we have bylaws for membership, we have bylaws for representation, we have bylaws for decision making, which is pretty much led, the interpretation is led by the president and the Democracy and Development Officer. What I'm proposing is, we need to have more representation in terms of student. So effectively, we use the bylaws wherein we say that associate members who have limited rights should be increased in number. The voting policies change from 50% of attending voters +1 to kind of pluralistic systems. So these kind of structural changes would enable mandatory uptake of policies that is relevant for most people. For example, I'm a postgraduate, and one of my campaign agendas is provisioning relaxation pods. We have just one 17 feet by 15 feet PG hub, postgraduate hub for relaxation, and that is also used for studies after the Senate House study spaces after they're booked. They are being used for studies and meetings. So the international students' claims and the kind of postgraduate sentiments are not looked after and are not taken up. Obviously, I can understand it's a pretty much non-pluralistic system here, and the student union does more for the undergraduate crowd. So establishing student parliament and living grants, mass lobbying, and capacity building. This is one of the best things I've had to experience after coming here in UK. Probably you guys know Richard Jackson, SU Advice Center, Housing.
Apologies, I'm going to have to cut you off. You're out of time. Let's give him a huge round of applause. And let's put our hands together again for our fourth candidate of the night, Big Ben.
Hello, everyone. A year ago, there were 2 candidates on this stage for the position of president. This year, there are 5. The turnout in this election is well on its way to being record-breaking, much like it was in autumn, and nominations are way up across the board as well. That is my legacy on democracy. On development, I've halved the fine the university puts on you when you lose your ID card. I've got them to agree to put more microwaves in the library. We've installed free boiling water. I've done a lot across the board. I have a strong record and realistic policies. So what do I want to do? The university has launched a disciplinary process review, and I have 3 stages of what I want to do to make sure it works for us. First off, get students involved at every level and every stage of that review so we know our voices are being heard and they're not assuming them for us. Second, getting the university to deliver on its clear statement of our values, of what this university stands for and what is and is not acceptable. Because we need to accept something like the group chat will happen again, and we need the systems to be ready for that to make sure we are safe. And third, making sure that throughout the review, the university is being clear and transparent about when it will be delivered and where they are at with the process. What else do I want to do? More than double mental health funding per student to bring it up to the Russell Group average, bring counselling from Westwood to Senate House into a new wellbeing centre at the heart of campus to say we are taking mental health seriously. I want to introduce a new university-run bus service to break Stagecoach's monopoly. I want nap pods on campus. Loads more stuff that's all in the manifesto. But one final thing. A year ago, I stood on this stage and said we needed to make the hustings warmer. We'd come in from a freezing cold day, and Warwick, summer has arrived. The hustings are warmer. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, put your hands together for our final candidate of the night, Josh Market.
All right, guys, so I'll keep this brief. So obviously I'm not a SU establishment candidate, I'm coming in from outside, and the reason being is because I don't see that the SU has delivered much change over my 3 years here at the university. I've been assured that there is stuff going on behind the scenes, but normal students feel left out and ignored, and that needs to change. So there's 3 simple policies that are deliverable and can be easily achieved that I am proposing here. So firstly is regarding mental health services on campus. Mental health services on campus are probably just as good as when I started here. There has been some changes, but not enough. At the moment, there is a 2-month waiting list for counselling appointments. That's not good enough. Secondly, I want to improve study spaces on campus. whether that be Central Campus or Gibbet Hill Campus. At the moment, there is misuse of space, and much better provision could be provided, providing hundreds of spaces on campus. It's really simple stuff to do. And finally, I want to promote free speech on campus. Now, this is probably the most controversial part of my manifesto, and I don't believe that free speech is a bad thing. It's something that we should cherish and support. It's the heart of our democracy. Yes, of course, free speech is something that can cause contention and can cause people to be upset. However, when used properly and fostered correctly, we can actually make it into a very powerful tool and make the student experience at work a lot better. And that means working with all sides of the argument and helping societies bring in more speakers to help provide that discussion. That's why I want the societies to have a more simplified way of bringing speakers onto campus, but also for them to be able to bid for funds if they feel they need to help cover things like security costs. This is all crucial to us improving our own opinions on campus. And if we cannot build our own opinions on campus, then what is the point of coming to university? Thank you.
Thank you very much to all candidates. So we're now going to move on to the questions part of our session. So a reminder, each candidate will have a minute to respond to your questions. We're taking questions from Facebook Live, from the floor. But first of all, we're going to start off with a question that has been sent in. Reminder, questions are addressed to all candidates and not any specific candidates. So the question that has been sent in that we're going to start off with is this. The president often has to deal with crisis situations where relations with the SU and university break down. How would you handle situations like these? So to answer this question, we're going to start off with James.
Well, I imagine much so this question is referring to, of course, the group chat. And it must be said, the university in their handling of this has been awful. The transparency over this has been not there. And then subsequently, the appeals process has been shrouded in mystery. So in terms of the student union, we must call out when they're not doing things correctly. We must look out for students' interests. And if that means having a go at the university, calling out the university, making the university change, which we have done and are hoping to do with this group chat incident, then I think that we can achieve a lot of things with the university. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Kostaf. No, sorry. Yeah. You're up. Sorry, Larissa.
How to handle crisis? Is that the question?
The question was relations between the SU and the university often break down. The president has to deal with this crisis. How would you handle this kind of situation?
I think it's about priorities. I mean, the SU in its constitution, it represents students' interests. So to handle crisis, the kind of motions we are tabling will be obviously the utmost priority. That doesn't mean we kind of participate in kind of non-negotiations. That won't really resolve anything. So obviously engage with the administration, but on our terms, on more level terms. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. Ben, if you'd like to.
So, hang on. So crisis can mean obviously a lot of different things, but yes, the group chat is the obvious one, and that's the one I can tell you about my experience on. The Democracy and Development Officer, which I am currently, sits on the University Council with the President. On the morning of the Reclaim the University demo, there was a University Council meeting, and we made a decision on whether we went or whether we did not, and we boycotted it. We decided to go and hold them to account. We made them squirm, we said what we wanted, we relayed the student voice and said, no, this is unacceptable. I think that's the best thing to be doing, is to be in the room, holding them to account, saying what students want, making them uncomfortable when they need to be uncomfortable. The university-SU relationship fluctuates. Sometimes it's critical, sometimes we're collaborators. If there's a crisis, if they have messed up and done bad by students, we are there to hold them to account. But again, it depends on the crisis, obviously.
Thank you. Josh?
Okay, so crisis situations unfortunately do come along. And I think the most important thing to do is to take a minute, take a step back, and think about what is going on, what are all the facts, and try and think out what the impacts of such an action is going to be and what possible solutions there are. It's very easy to jump in very quickly and say, oh, this is not good enough, we need to change something. But often you need to take a pause and think about what you're going to do. So there are options available depending on what crisis situation is in front of you. But the SU does have a responsibility and does have to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Larissa. Oh, just a reminder of the question. So the president often has to deal with crisis situations where relations between the SU and the university break down. How would you handle situations like these?
So as Deputy President this year, it's definitely been the case that I've had to work extremely closely with Liam, our current president, to ensure that we can deal with crisis situations, namely the group chat incident, in the case of which I think it's really easy to look internally and think that we as a SAB team and we as the president, you have to come to decisions on your own. But one of the first things that we discussed was ensuring that we held an emergency student meeting. And we hosted that because it was important that students, particularly women, particularly survivors of sexual violence, particularly victims of racism and sexism or other forms of oppression, had their chance to speak and tell us how they wanted to be represented, tell us what to say, tell us how to hold the university to account, to give them a voice in that process. And so that's what I did then, and that's what I will continue to do as your president.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Are there any questions at all from the floor? We had one person put their hand up very fast at the back, just all the way at the back, yeah.
Hello. Yeah. So my questions to the candidates is, so in terms of free speech and the speakers coming here, what would your limits be in terms of allowing speakers to speak? Because obviously there's a wide range of speakers are available to come, but the SU has sometimes, the NUS, sorry, has established this policy of no platforming. So my question to the candidates is, what would the limits be towards the speakers who are allowed to come, that would be allowed to come, and how would you enact such policies to prevent them? Thank you.
So the question is about the limits on the speakers that you would invite to campus. Yeah, you're up first, yes.
I think this is a tricky issue. This is one of my campaign agendas as well, because I've personally spoken to a couple of presidents of religious societies, different religious societies, and they have also shared these concerns that often the speaker permissions are purposely delayed by the SU because they just don't want to deal with the issue. Now, the very idea that these speakers are, the kind of content they preach are contested in very popular circuits in London and other places, obviously is the source of the dilemma with the SU, so they don't want to really take a decision. But my idea behind this is to support all kinds of societies as much as possible and kind of have a proactive approach in terms of give autonomous permissions to the societies so that until an abuse happened, they can use as many autonomous permissions as they're permitted. And if they abuse, they'll be banned for a year or banned for a year or two. So that's the way to approach it, yeah.
Thank you. Ben?
This is a very nuanced question, and I think it mainly has two parts to it. What would I allow as president, and what do I think should be allowed? What would I allow as president? Well, I'm about realistic policies. I would allow what the law says I have to allow, which is free speech on campus. It has to be defended. That is the law. I can't break that. I don't want to go to jail. What would I do in response to that, though? The union has a place to play in this context of saying what we think the culture on our campus should be, what we think the values we should hold are. And I'm not going to hold back from saying that I don't think certain speakers should be coming onto our campus and spreading hate, saying that certain individuals don't have the right to exist or certain facts of their existence are not true. That is unacceptable. No one should feel uncomfortable on this campus or challenged in their very existence.
Thank you. Josh?
Okay, so in terms of who should be allowed on campus and what the limits are, so I would like to take the example of Anne-Marie Waters. That was a very controversial topic and a very controversial speaker to come onto campus, and she did not. and there were planned protests, and freedom of speech is about showing all aspects and all sides of this. So what I believe should be done about this is that the union should take on control. It should not be a society having to organise something like that. I do not believe that Anne-Marie Waters should not be allowed to come to the university and talk, but what I do believe is that she should be here, and she should be also contested. There should be somebody else here to debate her, someone who is also competent in the subject here to discuss the topic. And it's a very simple way, and this very atrium could very well be used for that. And security is also a potential necessity regarding this, and this is why I want to help set up a fund that different societies can use, and then use that to help with the funding of security.
Thank you, Josh. Larissa?
So I think universities are sites of knowledge production, they're sites of ideation, they're sites of innovation, and with that comes great responsibility, to freedom of speech being one of them. However, I believe that in this conversation, we also need to put the voices of marginalized students first. We need to think about the impacts on them before we act, and we need to be bold enough to draw a line between free speech and hate speech, and to act accordingly. So my answer to this question has always been and will always be that marginalized students and the further oppression of those communities are of my utmost responsibility and my utmost importance, and that is what I will fight to protect their safety.
Thank you. And finally, James.
Well, I'm a believer in free speech. I think it's one of the tenets of our society. But you talk about the limitations on it, and there are limitations on free speech. Incitement to violence, hate speech. These things cannot be allowed. However, that is not sometimes what we're seeing on this campus. I can remember not too long ago, there were organized attempts to prevent a person like Jacob Rees-Mogg speaking. Now, I remember a motto my school used to have. They tried to sound fancy and put it in Latin. Ad vitam paramus, which means preparing for life. And university is not preparing people for life by essentially closing the curtains, putting their fingers in their ears and going, la, 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 I can't hear you. That is not a way to prepare individuals for life. So, as I say, there are, of course, curtailments in freedom of speech, such as incitement to violence and hate speech, but barring that, I think we should stick with what's required by the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from anybody from the floor? Yes. The person just right on the edge in the middle. Behind it, yes, yeah.
Hi. So I'm a young black girl from London, and coming to a predominantly white university has been a challenging experience for me around settling in and pressure in terms of my mental health. So my question to all the candidates is, what will you do to support black students like myself on campus?
Thank you. Ben, if you'd like to start us off. Ben Newsham, yes.
Sorry, I thought it was someone else. Sure, so I'm very aware of the fact that I'm a white man. That is a fact. I am not here to speak on behalf of oppressed communities on this campus, those who have different experiences to me. We have liberation and diversity officers at the SU who are meant to do that job for us, but they often get completely overloaded. I want to increase the resources and the time we have for our part-time officers so they're better able to represent the communities they have been elected by, to empower their voices through their students' union. It's their students' union, it's your students' union as much as it is mine. It should be here for your voice as well as it is for mine, so that every voice in our diverse community, our diverse campus, is being heard in every stage of SU policy and process.
Thank you, Ben. Josh?
Okay, so minority groups on campus obviously face different issues, and that is why we have liberation officers, and liberation officers have a very specific role to play in this, and they should not be undermined in what they do. However, the SU is also for all students on campus, and many feel ignored, and this also needs to change. And in terms of the mental health point, mental health on campus also needs to be improved, obviously. NHS services need to be brought onto campus. They should have some sort of provision on campus that the NHS can come here and provide those services if necessary. because otherwise you have to travel all the way to the other side of Coventry, which is ridiculous. And this is a policy that helps all students, not just black, not just gays, anybody. It's all about all students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josh. Larissa?
Okay, surprise, surprise, I'm a black woman. So, sis, thank you for coming and thank you for your question. I guess, first of all, I have to be really honest. Being the first black woman to become a sabbatical officer at Warwick has not been easy. And so I know all too well the struggles that come with that, of being a student here, of surviving here. And I think with that ethos, I take an anti-racist approach to everything I do. I'm the former president of Warwick Anti-Racism Society and the former co-president of Warwick Anti-Sexism Society. And that practice comes with me in everything that I do. But what that looks like practically is things like the Decolonise Project. It's things like the report that I produced on racism in higher education and then presented at the Houses of Parliament to ensure that we could have a national response to the EHRC inquiry on racism in HE. It's taking that initiative to go the extra mile. Those aren't the things that education officers before me have done, but it's making sure that we're having that voice in the national picture to influence policy and procedure. But also what that looks like in practice is remunerating our part-time officers. It's liberation communities that are putting in extra labour and not being paid for it, and that's why I've committed to paying our part-time officers in my manifesto.
In the interest of fairness for all candidates, thank you. James?
Well, I remember probably a year ago to the day, I was saying that part-time officers, their positions need to be codified, explained, and clear divisions between what full-time officers do and the part-time officers do. Yet only the other month, I received a message from a group of part-time officers saying, we need more recognition. And much like Ben was talking about, that is exactly what we need to do. Make sure the part-time officers have the resources required, the recognition in student union bylaws, regulations and whatnot, to do their job to the fullest extent. And also you mentioned mental health, and that's exactly one of the biggest tenets of my platform, essentially, is welfare of students. So I want to continue the campaigns the student union does in terms of mental health, and I want to also work with the university as well, because the university are our partners in ensuring the well-being of students. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally?
First of all, I feel the question is unfair. I mean, you could probably talk about it in the context of industry.
The question was on the black student experience and coming here, being from a minority group.
No, I said the question was unfair because you probably are raising the, raising the intersectionality issue, whereas a black student having a mental health issue. But when you talk to a medical practitioner or a psychologist, he won't discriminate whether you're black. He would focus on your experiences or what you're going through. So we as facilitators of care won't really discriminate whether you're a black student. I mean, in policy literature, this is a typical intersectionality issue, and I don't really attest to it. It's in my manifesto as well. I am talking about capacity building. When you talk about SU Advice Center, well-being services, ramp it up, put more funds into it, but please don't discriminate in terms of black people having mental health issues. Mental health issues strike everyone. You don't need to be black to treat it. You don't need to be black to facilitate it.
We'll now move on to take more questions from the floor. A person at the back had their hand up very quickly. All the way at the back, all the way in the group that sat in a circle by the light.
Thank you. Warwick is actually the 19th most international campus in the world, and yet we see that the engagement of non-British students with the SU is, I would say, minimal. So what would you do to encourage and help international students, whether from the EU or outside of the EU, engage more, regardless of the gender or the race?
Thank you very much. Josh, if you'd like to answer first.
Okay, so the minorities on campus from international groups are very important to university life here, and it's all part of us developing a worldview and understanding what is going on around us and getting different perspectives. So they're crucial to this. And that is why I want to be working to help all students on campus, whether that be whatever background they are from. And that is why the policies I am proposing are all there just to help every single student on campus. It's not about picking on certain groups, not about selecting certain people to be helping. This is about making student experience for all on campus a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Larissa?
I'm really glad you asked this question because I think that it's actually a damning indictment of the SU that international students don't engage with the things that we do, the events we run, and that kind of thing. And I've kind of identified that as an issue this year as Deputy President. And actually next week, I'm hosting focus groups of international students. So please do come along and sign up on the SU website if you're interested in getting involved, because I really want to tap into the fact that we don't engage with international students well and improve that this year. But next year, some of the things that I want to do is continuing that project to make sure that we have particular provisions. This year, I ran kind of a meet and greet for international students in Welcome Week, but I'm thinking about making that a more regular opportunity for international students to engage with, so they can meet with other international students who are going through the same kind of structural barriers, so that we can address those properly and adequately, so that we get better engagement and actually do better for our international students. Thanks.
Thank you, Larissa. James?
Well, I certainly think one way to go about it, to get international students to engage with the student union, is for the student union to engage with international students. Now, one of the things I previously mentioned was setting up a welfare task force dealing with international students' welfare. And I think that is certainly a way to let people know the student union is thinking about you, the student union is trying to do things to your benefit, and that's certainly a way to get the student union out there. Also, I think there's certain things that the student union can do to improve its own democracy in terms of transparency and accountability. And I have pledges to that effect, such as making student council more open and easier to go to, making ASVs Facebook live streamed, and so on and so forth. There are certainly things that we can do to improve our democracy and improve student engagement with international students. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Costa?
Thank you for the question. This is exactly the idea I'm basing my entire campaign on. So I feel underrepresented. I am an international student myself. I think partly we are to blame as well. We don't really take interest, and we are not really that active on campus. We're here for a year or whatever the reason is. But I think first point of engagement, as I said, to increase more associate members within the structure of the student parliament that I talked about. That is how I wish to engage all kinds of underrepresented communities on campus, including international students.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Ben.
I have quite a strong record on this. So in the autumn elections, when we saw turnout go way up, a large amount of that was coming from international students who previously hadn't engaged at all. Also, when I was first coming into this post, one of the first things I did was work slightly with the head of Welcome Week to ensure not all of what was formerly in the International Orientation Week was lost in the new Welcome Week. There's a lot more work on that to be done this year. And I think this also goes back to working with the part-time officers. So we have two international students officers, one EU, one non-EU. I think they both need more support to better represent their communities and help us reach out in a way that is straightforward and makes sense to every part of our diverse community.
Thank you, Ben. So next we had a question from Facebook Live, and the question is, to what degree are all of your policies achievable within a single year of your term? So to answer this first, we'll have Larissa.
So I think it's really a misconception that every single policy on a manifesto has to be achieved within a single year. As a student officer, I see my role as taking up the mantle of student officers who've come before me and passing that baton on to those who come after me, and building a legacy that stands up the test of time and ensures that we as a student movement and we as students can continue that year after year, month after month, day after day. So not every single policy on my manifesto is achievable in a year. We're not going to reclaim our entire university from a whole history of elitism, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia in a year, and I'm not claiming to do that. I'm not pretending that I can. What I'm saying is I want to lay the foundations and build upon the foundations built before me to ensure that we can do that as a student movement and that can continue into the future. Thank
you, Larissa. James? James, if you'd like to come up and answer the question.
Yes, I think that a great deal of my policies could be achieved within a single term. It concerns dealing with the university, changing their systems, dealing with the student union and changing their systems. But of course, there are policies that can't be done in a year. As much as you would like to try to do it, time would just not allow it. So what I will hope to do with these more long-term policies is simply build them up, start the process, and hope that my successor picks up the mantle and continues forth with these more long-term policies that will benefit students. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Costa?
I think, honestly, in a way, I'm advising to change the very fabric of the institution as such. I think everyone agrees on that, so it probably won't be achievable within a single year, but I would ensure that the framework's set there, because as a president, as I said, most of the bylaws, in spite of I mean, there are two people who are literally in charge, the Democracy and Development Officer and the President, who is the lead interpreters for most of the bylaws, and I think I can get things going. This is not a position that just is taken for granted, so I can get things moving and change the very structure and the very fabric of the institution for the good. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
Part of what has been said about the longer-term picture is true, but I do think part of what is being said about delivering in a single year is also very important. My entire manifesto is built around deliverability and being achievable. Everything I have put in that manifesto I think is completely possible. I want a university-run bus service, they've already started scoping one out. I want to ditch Circuit Laundry, their contract ends next year. I want to abolish the university card replacement fee, they've already halved it. Every single thing in that manifesto is possible and deliverable, and almost all of it is deliverable within a single year.
Thank you, Ben. And finally, Josh.
Okay, so all my policies are based on being deliverable within a year. And it's those policies then which will have an impact, which will create an excellent legacy for all future students to come. And the issue being, if we focus just on the long-term issues, then the short-term issues get ignored, and things need to change now for students who are here now. So all the policies I have to propose can be dealt with and delivered within my first year. Mental health services, getting more NHS staff onto campus, that's easy to do. We just need to talk to the NHS. Getting more study spaces, there are very practical and simple solutions that we can do to increase study spaces on campus. And providing and promoting freedom of speech, that is also very simply done. And we can do that by facilitating it here in the union itself. Thank you.
So unfortunately, we are reaching the end of our time here. It is also 7 p.m, so we are now going to go to our final question of the night for the presidential candidates from Mr. Liam Jackson, the current president.
Thank you, Leo.
Make it good, Liam.
Oh, it's not going to be that good. So as president, you wear lots of hats. You are the main external facing role. You are representing the SU and students nationally, regionally, internationally sometimes. You're also the chair of the Board of Trustees. You are supporting the rest of the officers as well. And also, there's lots of students to represent with potentially sometimes very different things that they want to see you do. How do you juggle all these? And actually, what qualities do you think actually make you can do this well as the president?
Thank you very much. James, if you'd like to answer first.
So, if you were here last year, you may remember I had a little answer about the Board of Trustees. And that is, to quote Mr. Kanye West, no one man should have all that power. I believe that the president should not be the chair of the Board of Trustees. I think that is too much power invested in one individual. However, I do get your point that in tow of being with the president of the student union, you also, it's outward faced. And I do think that is entirely possible to take those roles on and to juggle them, as you've so well done this year with so many incidents to put out. So yes, there are some parts of the job that I don't think the president should have. But barring that, I think they are manageable as long as you organize it logistically and work through them all. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next up, Kostav.
I feel diplomacy is not one of my strongest suits, as you would have understood by now. I'm a straight talker, but also sensationalization is not. So I never sensationalize issues. I keep it brief. I keep it to the point. I think that's how we really get to kind of casually pick up issues and help facilitate policy uptakes very quickly. That's how it works with me. And I never sensationalize issues, as most people claim that, oh, it's a big issue, but then, you know, we need so much resources. We really don't, if we can manage to do it individually within a network. So yeah, that's my management style, and I think that works. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben?
First off, in response to James, the president should be the chair of the board of trustees. Our elected leader should be the leader of the SU. That's how it works. On the question Liam asked, Michael Kynaston, my predecessor in my current role, said two things to me when I took the job. The first off was that development covers everything. It eats everything. It's a very big job, so I already know how to balance lots of different areas of a single role. And the second thing he told me was that the pairings on the SAB team between different offices are all different, but the one the DDO works closest with is the president. Liam, we sit on so many committees together, and I live with you. I never stop seeing you. It needs to end. But I know how the president's job works because I've seen it so closely. I know how to juggle those hats because I've seen you do it.
Thank you. Josh?
Okay, so in terms of juggling different things, so I've demonstrated that I can juggle different things throughout my whole time here at university and before that. And it's really down to your personal transferable skills. In terms of being able to juggle different things, it's all down to understanding what your priorities are and also understanding what the most urgent things are. And you just simply work through things. It's not too difficult to do. All I need is my diary, my paper diary, which without I cannot function. And I use that, and that's how I juggle everything. So that's how I would carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And finally, Larissa?
So undeniably, the role that works closest with the president is the deputy president. And so I guess I've been able to really see how, in fact, Liam has been a shining example of how to juggle those different responsibilities. And myself having to juggle the role of education officer with the responsibilities of deputy president, but then also doing external activism through the NUS Black Students campaign, but also through different avenues of activism, and seeing all of those as vehicles to one common goal. And I think that's exactly what I would do in my role as president. It would be to ensure that all of those things to come to a cohesive, comprehensive ability to perform the role the best I possibly can. And so I would prioritize and make sure I was well equipped and informed to make those decisions about what's most urgent, what most needs to be done in that moment and in the long term. So in conclusion, I definitely think I have the abilities to fulfill this role and all of its responsibilities fully. Thanks.
Thank you. And that, sadly, brings us to the conclusion of our main sabbatical officer question time. So let's give all the presidential candidates a warm round of applause and wish them all the best.